Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive.
Great to be back.
Today, we are plunging headfirst into a mystery that has, well, haunted history for centuries.
A legendary artifact, you mean?
Exactly. One that seems to evoke this immediate sense of unease just by its presence. Imagine a book so colossal, so imposing,
Right.
and with an image so chilling, it earned itself the name The Devil's Bible.
The Codex Gigas.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are talking about the Codex Gigas, that's its official name, but trust me, its infamous nickname is far more fitting, wouldn't you say?
It certainly captures the imagination more.
This is a giant medieval manuscript, likely written in the Czech Republic during an era of just, well, unimaginable plague, darkness, despair.
Very bleak time.
And right there, nestled within its ancient pages, is this huge full-page picture of evil incarnate.
Page 290 specifically, we'll get to that.
Our goal today isn't just to recount the incredible story, though we will. It's more to unearth the profound human beliefs and fears it embodies.
Why this book?
Yeah, why this one artifact, above all others, became this sort of nexus for tales of diabolical pacts and, well, relentless misfortune.
What does it tell us about the medieval mind?
And maybe even about our own, enduring fascination with the dark side.
Absolutely.
Our mission today is to take a deep dive into the sources surrounding this incredible artifact. It's housed safely now in the National Library of Sweden.
Thankfully.
To extract the most important nuggets of knowledge, insight about its mysterious origins, its tumultuous journey, and these haunting legends that just refuse to let go.
And what truly stands out here, for me, is precisely that blend you mentioned.
The fact and fiction.
Exactly. You've got verifiable historical fact rubbing shoulders with these deep-seated medieval belief systems, and then this enduring folklore that's just sort of coalesced around it.
It's unique.
Totally unique. This isn't just any old book. Even back in the Middle Ages, people recognized it as something truly extraordinary.
They called it a wonder of the world.
One of the 7 wonders of the world, believe it or not. And it remains one of the strangest, most compelling items in the entire Swedish collection.
Wow.
So the real challenge for us today, as we dig into its story, is going to be carefully separating that tangible historical impact
What we know happened.
from the powerful, almost magnetic legends that have grown up around it. Legends that still captivate us.
Right. So let's start with what we know. The book itself. Its sheer, undeniable physical presence.
It's immense.
The Codex Gigas is, without a doubt, the largest illuminated manuscript on record. When we say large, I mean it literally stands 3 feet long.
Almost a meter.
And weighs a staggering 175 pounds. I mean, that's heavier than some people.
Yeah, imagine being a medieval monk tasked with just moving this thing. You'd need a team.
Definitely. And it's made up of 310 sheets of vellum.
Which is specially prepared animal skin, remember. Very laborious to make.
And these sheets are incredibly large. That allows for just a vast amount of writing and illustration.
It really does.
So what does this extraordinary physical presence tell us? Not just about the craftsmanship, but maybe the intent behind such a monumental undertaking.
Oh, it speaks volumes, doesn't it? The craftsmanship alone tells you this was an extraordinarily expensive book for its time.
One of the most costly ever.
Likely, yes. Illuminated manuscripts like this weren't quick jobs. They were typically worked on for decades, not by just one person,
Right.
but by multiple illustrators, scribes, all painstakingly adding detail.
And the illustrations in this one.
The Codex Gigas features 5 pictures and 77 beautifully illustrated capital letters. Each one is like a miniature work of art in itself.
Incredible detail.
And you touched on its content earlier. It's not just a Bible, not by a long shot.
Right, you mentioned other texts.
Beyond the complete biblical texts, this tome also contains a really diverse collection. Medical texts, ancient histories, even encyclopedias.
Wow, so it's like a whole library in one.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sheer presence of such diverse texts within a single massive volume like this perfectly reflects those encyclopedic ambitions of medieval scholarship and monastic life.
Trying to gather all knowledge.
Pretty much. Imagine a monastery needing all essential knowledge right there, readily available. This book was quite literally designed to be a comprehensive library in one albeit extremely heavy form.
A compendium of everything they thought was essential.
For spiritual life, for practical life, everything within the monastery walls.
So it's not just a religious text, it's this vast repository of medieval understanding, a portable university almost.
In a way, yes.
But, of course, the book gets its terrible nickname, as we said, from one specific, truly unnerving revelation.
Page 290.
Page 290. There's that full-page image of the devil in hell. Can you walk us through the details? What are we actually seeing there?
Absolutely. And you have to understand, this image was unequivocally meant to terrify and instruct.
Scare them straight, basically.
You could say that.
Yeah.
The devil depicted here is truly monster-like. He has 2 arms, 2 legs, but uniquely.
Uniquely how?
He has 4 fingers and 4 toes on each limb. It emphasizes his unnatural, corrupted form.
Okay, that's weird.
It is, and he's got these prominent red horns and, disturbingly, 2 red tongues protruding from either side of his mouth.
2 tongues. Why?
It's not just for shock value. It's a vivid visual indication of his duplicity, his role as the father of lies. That was a key theological concept then.
Ah, the forked tongue idea. Speaking lies.
Exactly. Misleading humanity. What's also compelling about this depiction is how unusual it is for the 13th century.
How so? Weren't there lots of devil images?
There were, but many portrayals from that period showed him maybe with a tail, often scaly or furry, a more bestial, grotesque form.
Right.
But in the Devil's Bible, he has this very human torso, almost deceptively familiar.
Okay.
But then he has these terrifying long claws extending from his hands and feet. And his eyes, they're described as extraordinary, nasty little beady eyes, almost designed to pull you in, to make you feel those talons. It's a stark reminder that the devil in the medieval mind wasn't some distant, abstract concept.
He was real.
Very real. An ever-present threat, always waiting around the corner to seize your soul if you strayed.
And you mentioned this image, the horns, the claws, isn't actually biblical.
That's crucial. This popular depiction, horns, pitchfork we often add later, forked tail. It's not based on biblical text. It's firmly rooted in medieval legend and these vivid, often frightening ideas people had of ghouls and goblins. It's a blend of Christian theology and older folk beliefs.
That vivid depiction is really unsettling, especially knowing it's more legend than scripture. It makes me wonder, how did a society, so devout, reconcile putting such a terrifying, almost monstrous image inside a sacred text, especially if it was meant to terrify?
That's a really key question.
Was there, a commonly accepted reason, or did it spark controversy even back then? And what about where it's placed in the book? You said page 290.
The placement is hugely significant. Everything leading up to page 290 is biblical content.
Okay.
Dealing with ideas of hope, salvation, often illuminated with beautiful aspirational art, things pointing towards heaven.
You're right, the positive stuff.
Exactly. But then you hit this powerful, terrifying image, and immediately after it, the texts take a decidedly darker turn.
Darker.
They start dealing with exorcism, with sins, with prayers of protection.
Okay, that makes sense after seeing the devil.
It does, but then it gets stranger. It even includes texts on necromancy.
Necromancy, like talking to the dead in a Bible.
Yep, a form of divination involving communication with the dead. Finding that right after the devil's image, inside what's ostensibly a Bible, it sparks immediate questions.
I'll bet.
Are these spells and formulas meant to counteract the influence and the power of Satan, as some scholars suggest, like a guide for how to fight back?
Maybe.
Or, given the book's subsequent history, the fires, the misfortunes, is the book itself cursed? And is that protective glass case it's kept in today actually there to protect us, the viewers?
Wow, that's a chilling thought.
It is, and it reflects that very real medieval belief that some objects could hold genuine, malevolent power.
That context, the medieval scholarship, the spiritual warning, it makes the book's sheer scale even more impressive. But with a book this imposing, its origin story has to be equally epic, right?
Oh, absolutely.
What's the most widely circulated legend about its creation, and how much of that is supported by what we actually know?
You're absolutely right. It's such an extraordinary book, demands an equally extraordinary origin story. And the one associated with the Devil's Bible is truly chilling.
I'm ready.
The legend dates the writing somewhere between 1204 and 1230. The widely accepted author is believed to be Herman Inclusus.
Inclusus.
A name that's actually found within the book itself. Now, that Latin word inclusus means shut in.
Like a recluse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It suggests he was a monk who lived in seclusion, perhaps as a form of penance or devotion, maybe even walled up in a cell.
Walled up, okay. And the legend intensifies from there, doesn't it? Tell us about the betrayal, the desperate bargain.
Indeed. The story goes that this Herman the Recluse was a Benedictine monk from the small Bohemian monastery of Podlazes.
Okay.
He allegedly betrayed his vows. Now, the specific nature of this sin, this betrayal, it's lost to time. But it must have been serious.
Because the punishment was severe.
Extremely. He was condemned to death by being walled up, immurement, sealed alive within a wall, a horrific sentence.
Unbelievable.
Facing imminent death, in a desperate plea for reprieve, he makes this astonishing offer. He says he will create the most beautiful book in 24 hours.
In 24 hours, a book that size, that's impossible.
Utterly impossible for a single human, especially within that time frame.
And this is where the truly diabolical part of the legend kicks in, isn't it? The pact.
Precisely. So, midnight approaches. Hermes nowhere near finished, obviously. He realizes the futility of his task. He's desperate.
Cornered.
Totally. And the legend claims he called upon the devil himself. He offers his immortal soul in return for the manuscript's completion by dawn.
Wow.
Miraculously, the story claims the next day, the colossal manuscript is complete. Done. Perfect.
Just like that.
Just like that.
Yeah.
And that very arresting image of the devil we talked about on page 290.
Yeah.
Some whisper that it was a kind of thank you note from Herman, the recluse, to his lord and master Satan.
Yeah.
A prominent, terrifying dedication within a sacred text.
That is quite a story, a dramatic tale. But what's really compelling, you mentioned, is how this diabolical legend seems to be supported by some, well, startling facts, things that actually lend a bit of credibility to this idea of a cursed origin.
Yes, this is where it gets really intriguing.
Can you delve into that evidence? What makes this story so hard to just dismiss outright?
What's genuinely striking here is the empirical evidence, things we can actually observe about the book. Experts who have meticulously examined it have found absolutely no error in the writing.
No mistakes at all in a book that huge.
None. Which is highly unusual. In other illuminated manuscripts from the period, you often find, blotted ink, sections that have been erased, maybe misspelled words. Clear signs of human fallibility revision.
Sure, that makes sense.
The Codex Gigas, however, is flawless in its execution, almost unnervingly perfect.
Okay, that's point one. What else?
Furthermore, forensic handwriting experts have confirmed that the handwriting throughout the entire manuscript is remarkably uniform.
Uniform.
And crucially done by the same person.
One scribe for the whole thing.
Apparently so. Which in itself is an incredible feat for such a massive book. But it gets even more astonishing. These same experts have assessed that it would have taken one person, get this, up to 30 years of continuous focused work to complete a book of this magnitude, working day in, day out.
30 years. Okay, so a single scribe working for decades. That's already a monumental undertaking. But then there's that truly extraordinary anomaly, isn't there? The thing that really makes you pause.
Exactly. This is the kicker. The handwriting doesn't change across this estimated 30-year period.
Doesn't change at all.
Not perceptibly. Think about that. If you or I sat down to write something huge, starting in our 20s and finishing in our 50s.
Our handwriting would definitely change.
Of course. Your grip, your style, your consistency would fluctuate over decades. It's just natural human aging and development.
Right.
The fact that the handwriting in the Codex Gigas remains perfectly consistent throughout this entire vast piece is, humanly speaking, pretty much an impossibility.
So how do people explain that?
Well, they often don't. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this meticulousness, this impossible consistency in such a massive undertaking, it's highly unusual. And it certainly fuels the mystique surrounding the book's creation.
It really does.
It forces us to consider that boundary, between human endurance, incredible skill, and something that might verge on, well, supernatural intervention. And these kinds of stories, like Herman's Pact, they act almost like social parables, don't they?
How do you mean?
They suggest how the intense, all-consuming pursuit of something, even something good, or just a difficult task, can sometimes become destructive if it's taken to extreme lengths, like an obsession.
So it's not just a thrilling story, but maybe a profound social parable about the dangers of obsession, even in pursuing something noble.
That's one way to look at it, yes. It makes that legendary act of desperation almost seem like an inevitable part of its creation story, doesn't it?
It really does.
Mhm.
Okay, so beyond the book itself, you mentioned Bohemia, its birthplace, seems steeped in this infernal lore.
It does.
Let's talk about Houska Castle. You said it's just 30 miles north of Prague, dates from the same 13th century. What's so unique about this fortress? I've heard whispers it was built to keep something in rather than out. Is that right?
It's a compelling question, and yes, a perfect example of Bohemia's rich, often dark, folklore. Houska Castle, the modern stone castle we see today, built around 1270. It's a bit of an architectural anomaly.
How so?
It just doesn't have many of the features you'd expect of a typical defensive castle. It's not really fortified outwards. In fact, a lot of the protection and decoration seem to be focused inside its walls,
Inside.
creating the sense of inward containment, which immediately raises that chilling question you mentioned. Instead of keeping invaders out, is it actually trying to keep something in?
Wow. And the legend goes way back.
The story of Houska Castle truly begins much earlier, maybe around 870, with just a wooden structure built in the forest over these mysterious cracks in the rock.
Cracks in the ground.
Yeah, and legend has it that these cracks emitted a foul stench, and disturbingly strange creatures were seen coming out.
Creatures. Like what?
The stories are vague but terrifying. Later, a second stone castle was built with a very specific purpose to control what was coming out of the crack below it.
So contain whatever was emerging.
Exactly. And the castle's chapel. It was intentionally built directly over this fracture, this crack, which was widely believed at the time to be leading directly to the gates of hell itself.
Seriously. They thought it was a hellmouth.
That was the belief. The legend claims that evil started to spill out of this opening. People reported seeing winged creatures, including a leathery winged chimera.
A chimera, like part lion, part goat, part snake.
Something monstrous like that, yeah.
Yeah.
A truly terrifying beast. Sulfur gases were said to spew forth, terrorizing the whole surrounding area.
What happened?
Farmland was failing, animals were sick, animals were going missing, all seemingly due to this huge fracture in the earth. So this second stone structure, the castle, was essentially designed to act as a plug.
A plug for hell.
That was the idea, to block what they believed was an actual gateway.
And the builders even left clues. Warnings on the walls.
Precisely. Inside the chapel, perhaps to warn future generations,
Mm.
they left these visual clues on the walls, warnings about what they'd witnessed or what might happen if this hole ever opened up again.
What do they show?
You can see a female centaur, notably left-handed, which was traditionally associated with evil, the sinister side,
Okay.
and she's pointing an arrow at a human being, a clear threat. And nearby, there's Archangel Michael weighing souls.
A common image.
Yes. But here, the devil is sneakily pulling down the left side of Michael's scale, trying to corrupt the judgment, trying to influence the outcome of human destiny towards damnation.
Wow. Subtle, but not really.
Not at all. And the pit itself, now covered, was allegedly used for a horrifying choice offered to prisoners at Houska during its darker periods.
What choice?
They could choose between standard torture or being lowered into the pit.
Oh, God. Did anyone choose the pit?
One particularly chilling account tells of a man who agreed. He was lowered down and apparently was heard screaming and wailing almost immediately.
And they pulled him up.
They brought him within seconds, but his hair had turned white, his eyes were full of terror, and he was completely insane. Died shortly after, the story goes.
Chilling. Are there, like, scientific explanations?
Oh, sure. You can posit perfectly reasonable scientific explanations for things like smells and destruction, maybe natural gas emissions, pockets of bad air, local environmental issues. But the chilling legend of a gateway to hell persists. It's deeply ingrained in the local folklore.
And you see a connection between this and the Devil's Bible.
What's fascinating here is how these two distinct 13th century Bohemian devil stories, the Bible and Houska Castle, so powerfully reflect the common beliefs of that era.
How so?
You see, the devil wasn't just some abstract theological concept back then. He was one of the church's best illustrative stories of how not to live your life.
A real boogeyman.
Absolutely. A tangible, active force in the world. In 13th century Europe, people genuinely believed that misfortune, illness, even just general bad luck could have a demonic origin.
Blame the devil.
Or see it as a punishment for something you've done, or just the result of demonic influence. So in many ways, the fear of the devil was as potent, as real, as the fear of God.
Two sides of the same coin?
A very powerful coin, shaping daily life, moral thought, providing this stark moral framework for everyone.
So the devil was truly a potent figure then, almost like a co-equal to God in how people thought about the world, as you described. But then, if people genuinely believed these misfortunes had demonic origins, wouldn't they shy away from a book with the devil's picture in it?
That's a shrewd observation, yeah.
Why would it gain such popularity instead of being shunned? And what about that regional influence you mentioned, Bohemia having unique artistic styles?
That's a great point. You'd think a book featuring such a terrifying devil might be avoided, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in the medieval mind, fear was often seen as a tool for salvation.
How?
Seeing the devil so vividly, maybe it served as a constant, visceral reminder of what to avoid, propelling people towards piety, towards God, to escape that fate.
Ah, okay, like aversion therapy.
Sort of. And on the regional influence, yes, there does seem to be some quite esoteric and distinctive stuff happening in the architecture and manuscript art, specifically in Bohemia in the 13th and 14th centuries. It often incorporates elements that lean towards, well, black magic or necromancy, things you wouldn't necessarily expect.
Why there, do you think?
It might be partly attributed to the geography of the region itself. It's a very wooded, forested area. Historically, maybe a place where older, pre-Christian pagan beliefs lingered longer and intertwined with the newer Christian ones, creating a unique blend, a syncretism.
Interesting. And Huska Castle's dark legend didn't end in the Middle Ages.
Not at all. Remarkably, it continued right into the modern era. In 1938, as World War II was looming, this area, then part of Czechoslovakia, was annexed by the Nazis.
Okay.
And the leader of the SS, Heinrich Himmler. He was reportedly very drawn to Huska Castle and its dark tales of unnatural power.
Himmler, why?
Himmler had this notorious interest in the occult. He was genuinely fascinated by the idea that power could be harnessed from evil, thinking it could somehow aid the Nazi movement.
Seriously?
Yes, and this castle, with its deep connection to a supposed gateway to hell, was specifically chosen for these reasons, according to some accounts.
What did they do there?
The Nazis are rumored to have used its underground spaces for, well, torture and even human experiments, believing these awful activities would somehow help them harness this dark power.
That's horrific.
There's also another chilling rumor that the Nazis used Hauska as an incubator facility for the Lebensborn program.
Lebensborn, that was the SS program for racially pure children, right?
Exactly, aimed at breeding this Aryan master race. Whatever the full truth of their activities at Hauska, all records were reportedly destroyed during the Nazis' flight from the Soviet Red Army in 1945. So much remains speculation.
Still, the fact that Himmler was drawn there adds another dark layer.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
But wait, there's more nearby. Just 10 miles up the road from Huska, there's another striking depiction of the infernal that sort of reinforces this regional preoccupation.
What is it?
These are the Akoti Halevi devil's heads.
Devil's heads.
Yeah. They are truly unlike anything else. Gigantic limestone carvings of heads just emerging from the rock face, standing a staggering 27 feet tall.
27 feet, that's huge.
To put that in perspective, their scale rivals the carvings of the American presidents on Mount Rushmore.
Wow, and they look demonic.
Oh, definitely. They are frightening, malevolent, melting faces. They immediately bring to mind, maybe, the description of the devil in Dante's Inferno.
That multi-faced giant trapped in ice.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
That kind of primal terror.
Are these ancient carvings?
No, that's the interesting part. There's no mystery about where they came from. They were carved in 1846 by a man named Vaclav Levy. He was actually a chef at the time.
A chef carved 27-foot devil heads.
He did. He later went on to become a well-known sculptor. But what we're seeing here, apparently, is the artist's deeply personal impression of his own tortured, trapped soul that he felt while working as a chef, waiting to express himself artistically.
So it's like giant, very posh, very old graffiti.
Huh. You could absolutely call it that. A public outpouring of personal anguish carved on a massive scale. Yeah, taken together.
Yeah.
These sites in Bohemia, from the ancient tales of Huska Castle, the Devil's Bible itself, to these more modern, albeit terrifying devil's heads, they paint this vivid picture. A landscape where the infernal held a really powerful grip on the popular imagination for centuries.
Right.
And this pervasive cultural backdrop isn't just a fascinating side note. It helps us understand why a book like the Codex Gigas, with its full-page devil, would resonate so deeply and become so central to the region's folklore.
The devil really maintained a firm grip there.
On the minds of the people of this land, Absolutely, for centuries.
Okay, so we've explored the book's physical marvels, its chilling origin legend, and this pervasive infernal lore right there in its bohemian birthplace. But the story of the Devil's Bible doesn't end there, does it?
Not by a long shot.
In fact, its journey across Europe only seemed to intensify the legends surrounding its malevolent power. It marks this tumultuous path fraught with peril and misfortune. So, how did this extraordinary manuscript begin its travels?
Well, interestingly, written on the very first page of the manuscript is a list indicating its creation in that monastery of Polassus we mentioned.
Okay.
Yet, the very birthplace of this Bible was destroyed not long after the book was completed. This was during a period of intense religious turmoil in Bohemia, the early 1400s.
Ah, the Hussite Wars.
Exactly.
Mm.
This fate, for many, just furthered the legend of its curse, suggesting it left devastation in its wake right from the start.
But it was saved by its own infamy, wasn't it?
Pretty much, yes. By the early 1400s, that region of Bohemia was indeed in the midst of intense religious turmoil. It was seen as a fulcrum of heresy, with figures like Jan Hus challenging the Catholic Church, calling it corrupt.
Right.
The monastery of Polassus, the place that gave the world the Devil's Bible, was indeed burned during these early religious wars. However, the sheer popularity of this extraordinary book actually saved it from that fiery demise.
No.
Monasteries, much like purist attractions today, relied heavily on pilgrimages for income. And if you had the choice back then between visiting a typical monastery with a small familiar Bible or going to the monastery with this extraordinary picture of the devil and a book that was really, really big.
You go see the giant devil book.
Probably. For the sheer spectacle. Seeing the incredible value, both spiritual and maybe financial, of the Devil's Bible, the Grand Sedlec Monastery nearby, known for its wealth, wisely acquired it from Podlasie just before its destruction.
Smart move. And Sedlec was rich.
Fantastically wealthy, yes.
Yeah.
Largely through a somewhat macabre form of income. Burials.
Burials made them rich.
Medieval monasteries could become incredibly wealthy by attracting local, affluent people to be buried in their graveyards, often required a substantial donation upon death.
Oh, okay.
And Sedlec found a particularly ingenious way of doing this. Back in 1270, their abbot Henry went to Jerusalem.
The Holy Land.
And brought back some sacred holy earth from Golgotha, the place where Christ was crucified. He then spread this holy earth in the monastery graveyard. After that, everyone in the region wanted to be buried at Sedlec. They believed it would grant them a better path to heaven. Prime real estate, spiritually speaking.
So a literal piece of sacred ground drew them in. But then death and destruction continued to follow the Devil's Bible, didn't they? This time on an unprecedented scale with the Black Death. How did that impact Sedlec?
Indeed. Bad luck, or the curse, continued. In the middle of the 14th century, the bubonic plague, the Black Death, struck the kingdom, wiped out maybe half of Europe's population.
Devastating.
And Sedlec, with its popular graveyard, simply ran out of space for the bodies. They couldn't keep up.
What did they do?
A drastic decision was made. Remove bodies from the existing burial ground, combine them with the new ones, and create an ossuary, a bone house where the bones would be stored.
An ossuary?
Yeah. The remains of an astonishing 30,000 individuals are thought to have eventually been deposited here.
30,000 people's bones.
Yep. And you can imagine over the centuries this might have gotten a little untight.
I can imagine.
So eventually, the monks of Sedlec decided to reorganize the bones. And in doing so, they created one of the most spectacular yet gruesome chapels in the world.
The Sedlec ossuary with the bone chandelier.
That's the one.
Mm.
The monks, seemingly with a lot of time on their hands, rearranged human bones from the cemetery into chandeliers, coats of arms, garlands.
Unbelievable.
And one, supposedly half-blind monk, even used a lot of bones to create these kind of huge pyramid-like structures, meticulously arranging skulls and femurs.
And his sight was restored.
Apparently, as a result of this rather morbid labor, his sight was supposedly restored,
Yeah.
adding another layer of miraculous, albeit unsettling, lore to the site.
It's an incredible place.
Sedlec Ossuary is quite unlike almost anywhere else on the planet. The Cathedral of Death, really,
Yeah.
that's been curated for 700 years.
Why display bones like that, though?
Ossuaries are a curiosity for us today, definitely. We've become quite disconnected from the dead in the modern age, usually placing them respectfully out of sight. But in earlier centuries, it wasn't uncommon to have, say, the remains of your ancestor, maybe a skull, displayed in your home. When you see them displayed en masse in an ossuary, They are acting as memento mori.
Memento mori. Remind me.
Remember, you must die. It's a concept central to Christianity. The idea that while you are alive, be aware you will be dead, and look to your soul.
Make the right choices now.
Exactly. If you want forgiveness, if you want resurrection in heaven, or if you want to risk hell, you make that final decision during your life. The bones are a stark reminder of mortality.
Okay, this raises an important question for me then. Could it be that the image of the Prince of Darkness, included so prominently in the Devil's Bible,
Yes.
could it have served a similar purpose, like the ossuary at Sedlec, a kind of memento mori?
Interesting comparison.
Might it be there to remind people of the need to live a good life, to make the right choices before death by showing them the alternative?
That's a very insightful connection. I think you're hitting on something profound there.
It's certainly a powerful way of personifying our worst fears.
It absolutely is. The image of the devil, in all its terrifying detail, could certainly function as a memento mori. A stark visual warning of the consequences of sin, much like the physical presence of tens of thousands of bones, makes death undeniable.
Making damnation vividly concrete.
Exactly. And as the manuscript continued its journey, it inevitably captured the attention of the rich and powerful.
Where did it go after Sedlec?
The Devil's Bible went from Sedlec to the famous Brevnov Monastery, right in the Bohemian capital of Prague.
Okay.
It remained there for about 3 centuries until it came to the attention of this incredibly important collector of the world's most significant religious artifacts, the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II.
Rudolph II. He was quite a figure, wasn't he?
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah.
A real paradox. A combination of an absolutely brilliant ruler and, by later accounts, well, a bit of a madman.
Madman.
He suffered from what was referred to back then as melancholia, what we would today probably call clinical depression. And this sometimes led to periods of intense isolation, preoccupation. Rudolph was an avid collector, known for just isolating himself among his treasures, sometimes staring at a single piece of work for hours, lost in thought, consumed by his melancholy.
But he was powerful.
Hugely powerful. Despite his personal struggles, Rudolph was one of the most colorful rulers in Europe.
Yeah.
And controversially, he moved the capital of the Holy Roman Empire from Vienna to Prague.
Why Prague?
He aimed to make it the cultural and scientific center of Europe, a new hub.
And he drew in unique minds, didn't he? Including those fascinated by the occult.
Indeed he did. In pursuing this goal, he strayed into what many considered, well, dangerous territory. His collection was incredibly diverse telescopes, advanced machinery, things that look like very early computers.
Wow.
But he's also incredibly fascinated by the occult sciences. He welcomed all sorts of free thinkers to his court, which was highly unusual for the time. Rabbis, Jewish mystics.
Alchemists, too.
Definitely a magnet for alchemists. For them, alchemy wasn't just about changing base metal into gold, remember. It was often seen as a profound spiritual exercise, about transforming the soul itself.
Interesting.
Rudolf II, in fact, is a really important figure in European history because the intellectual ferment, the sorts of studies undertaken in his court, they really formed the basis for what later became the scientific revolution.
So he's looking for treasures.
Always looking for a new extraordinary piece to add to his collection. And soon, he turned his attention to the treasures of the nearby Brevnov Monastery, where the Devil's Bible was residing.
He wanted it.
Oh, yes. Incredibly important people wanted the Devil's Bible. Why? Well, because it is truly extraordinary. There's no other manuscript like it. The size, the wealth of materials and labor, the sheer beauty of the illumination.
And maybe the mystique.
And then, of course, there's that little aspect. Maybe owning this thing, having it in his collection, could act as a protection against the devil. The talisman.
Ah, so he really wanted it.
Absolutely determined. And given that the monastery was conveniently within the Holy Roman Empire, he basically bullied the monks into handing it over, made it part of his personal collection.
And yet, despite acquiring this supposed protection, his reign then plummeted into chaos, didn't it? Adding another layer to the book's perceived curse.
It did, quite dramatically so. Brevnov Monastery loaned the Devil's Bible to the emperor, but soon after, his empire really began to crumble.
What happened?
The latter part of Rudolph's reign was just racked with revolt, war with the Ottoman Empire. He became increasingly a paranoid recluse. His titles were slowly stripped away by his own brother, Matthias.
Ouch.
Rudolph blamed his downfall on many, many people. But one thing he famously did was blame the people of Prague, the city he had so grandly elevated.
He cursed them.
He reportedly said to them, "I brought you this glory, and this is how you treat me." Many people believe that the curse against Prague supposedly uttered upon Rudolph's deathbed, is what directly led to the devastating conflicts that followed his death.
Including the 30 Years' War.
That's the belief, yes, that his curse helped ignite it.
Wow. The 30 Years' War saw just bloody warfare between most of the great powers of Europe, right? Huge casualties.
Up to 8 million casualties, some estimates say. Truly devastating.
And in 1648, near the end of the war, troops of the Swedish Empire, led by the formidable Queen Christina, besieged Prague.
That's right.
And they didn't just plunder indiscriminately. They went straight for Rudolph's treasured collection, didn't they? Including the Devil's Bible.
They knew exactly what they were looking for. The Swedes specifically targeted libraries, colleges, private collections, precisely to find books and artifacts like this to bring back to Sweden. It was a very planned attack.
It's interesting you noted that both Rudolph II and Queen Christina were, in their own ways, very modern monarchs for their time.
They were, both openly bisexual, apparently open to all kinds of ideas, extremely tolerant in many ways, highly learned.
And maybe that explains their shared fascination with the Devil's Bible, an artifact that itself seemed to defy conventional understanding, push boundaries.
I think that's a very strong possibility. Their desire for such a dangerous or consensus-challenging item speaks volumes about its perceived power, not just its beauty or historical value.
It had a certain allure.
It absolutely did. Both Rudolph and Christina were intellectually voracious, drawn to anything extraordinary or challenging to conventional thought. And the Devil's Bible certainly fit that description.
So the Swedes grabbed it.
It was one of the many, many treasures sacked by Queen Christina's army during the looting of Prague in 1648. And the sheer weight of the Bible was so great.
Yeah.
Legend states it took 2 of Queen Christina's soldiers just to carry it back to Stockholm. A real testament to its colossal size.
2 men just to carry one book.
And as it traveled north, many people who encountered the Devil's Bible would, well, experience fates similar to those who had suffered before it, adding to his growing reputation for misfortune.
And Queen Christina herself was quite the character, wasn't she?
Oh, truly remarkable. Queen Christina was incredibly well educated, known as the Minerva of the North, after the Roman goddess of wisdom, because of her exceptional cleverness.
Powerful woman.
A true woman of power in a man's world. Almost certainly gay, famously dressed as a man from an early age, really challenging the gender norms of her era.
And a collector, like Rudolph?
Oh, yes. She had a mania for collecting books, building one of the largest private libraries in Europe, though she also had this peculiar habit of losing other people's libraries during military campaigns.
Ah, convenient.
Indeed. Then in 1654, after 22 years on the throne, Christina made this momentous decision that really cemented her controversial reputation in Sweden.
What did she do?
She converted to Catholicism, renounced the throne of staunchly Protestant Sweden, and left to live the rest of her days in Rome as guest of the Pope.
Wow. Did she take her books? Did she take the Devil's Bible?
Before she left, she took many of her beloved books, yes, but she conspicuously did not take the Devil's Bible with her.
Why not? That seems odd for such a prized possession.
You might wonder, right? Why did Queen Christina decide not to take this particular book to the very center of Christianity? Perhaps that's the point.
Meaning?
Maybe the Pope and the Catholic Church simply didn't want what was essentially seen as a satanic authored Bible with its infamous image and dubious origins kicking around the Vatican. Too problematic.
Plausible. So the Devil's Bible remained in Stockholm, but its violent and cursed history, it seems, had followed it from Bohemia all the way to Sweden.
Indeed it had. The Devil's Bible was kept at the Royal Library in the Royal Castle of Stockholm, which was known as Tre Krona Castle, the Three Crowns Castle.
Okay.
Then in 1697, disaster struck. A huge fire broke out, destroying the entire building.
The whole castle.
Pretty much. This catastrophic event affected both the Royal Library and the Royal Archives. In that library, there were around 24,500 books and 14,000 manuscripts.
How many survived?
Only about a quarter of them survived the blaze. The Tre Krona Castle was utterly destroyed, later replaced by the Baroque Stockholm Palace we see today.
But the Devil's Bible survived the fire.
It did. It was saved, but not without cost, and of course, not without adding another layer to its legend.
How was it saved?
The story, now deeply ingrained in the book's lore, says that staff desperately threw it out of a window to save it from the flames.
Threw a 175-pound book out a window.
That's the story. And unfortunately, maybe because the book truly is cursed, as the legend goes, it lands on somebody's head outside, seriously injuring them.
Oh, no.
So even its escape was marked by a misfortune. And the Devil's Bible still bears the physical scars of that blaze today. You can see them in the darkened, almost scorched patches of vellum on some of its pages.
Wow. And it's around this time that a number of pages are said to have gone missing, right?
That's correct.
What could have happened to them?
The legend, of course, points back to Herman the monk.
Yes, speculation quickly arose that one of those missing pages had a prayer to Satan inscribed on it by the author Herman the Recluse.
Part of his pact.
Exactly. Maybe part of his infamous deal with the evil one. And perhaps it was removed later to sever that diabolical connection. That's the spooky version. But there's a more likely explanation.
There is, yes. One rooted firmly in historical context and the religious upheavals of the time. We know from an early description of the Bible that it once held a copy of the Rule of St. Benedict.
The rules for monastic life.
Exactly. Now, the Rule of St. Benedict in Catholic pre-Reformation Europe was simply the standard rule by which most monks and nuns lived. Pretty foundational, pretty inoffensive.
Okay.
But after the Reformation, when Sweden became staunchly Protestant, this rule was seen as a sign of Catholic living, which was not very welcome in its new Protestant home.
Ah, so the Protestants removed it.
That's the most likely scenario. In all likelihood, post-Reformation Protestants simply removed the Rule of Benedict because it represented the old Catholic ways.
Interesting.
It highlights how history is often reinterpreted, doesn't it? And how even physical objects like this manuscript get altered, not necessarily by supernatural forces, but based on the prevailing political and religious ideologies of the time.
Right. Even in modern times, though, the tales of the Devil's Bible's malevolent influence haven't entirely faded, have they?
Not completely, no.
There's that story from the 1850s about a caretaker.
Ah, yes, that one pops up. A story was published about a caretaker at the library who reportedly fell asleep at work. Standard enough.
And then,
When he woke up, supposedly around midnight, he claimed to see the Devil's Bible itself whirling around in the air, leading a crazy dance of books around it.
seriously, flying books.
That's the tale.
Yeah.
He allegedly lost his mind and never came back to his senses, a classic ghost story motif.
And interestingly, since the Devil's Bible was encased in glass in the treasury room,
Yes.
there have been no other reported incidents like that.
Make of that what you will. But the enduring fascination with pacts, particularly Herman's legend, is part of this broader, really ancient idea, isn't it? Making a pact, a deal with the devil.
It's a powerful trope.
The concept that there is good and evil, demons and angels, and that aligning yourself with one or the other will somehow empower you during your life. It's a tantalizing prospect for anyone, especially someone desperate.
We see these pact stories throughout history.
Oh, absolutely. It's fascinating that stories of people selling their souls to the devil go back right to the very earliest days of the church.
Any famous examples?
We see it throughout the medieval period. There was even a pope, Pope Sylvester II, who was rumored to have entered a deal with the devil to secure the papal throne.
A pope.
That's the legend. Then through the medieval period, the witch trials, of course. All those accusations claimed the accused were in league with the devil.
Right, that was central.
And it continues right through to modern times, in folklore and fiction. Are these merely stories, or could they be real? That's the big question the book seems to pose.
What do you think these stories represent?
I think maybe what these stories often do is they act almost like those social parables we talked about earlier. They're ways of suggesting that the pursuit of something, even something that might seem good in life, like knowledge or power, or even creating a beautiful book, can sometimes become so all-consuming, so obsessive, that it ultimately ends up becoming destructive. The means corrupt the end.
A cautionary tale.
Exactly. We may never truly know the truth of what happened between Herman the Recluse and, well, the devil back in the 13th century.
If anything.
If anything. But in the 21st century, the product of this supposed diabolical pact would make a significant journey. It returned to its homeland.
Back to Bohemia or the Czech Republic now. That must have been quite a moment given the book's long and fraught journey away from there.
It truly was a huge event. The journey of the Devil's Bible came full circle when it was loaned by Sweden to the Czech government and displayed in the National Library in Prague in 2007.
Wow. After centuries.
Literally centuries.
Yeah.
To Czech history lovers, the general public, they had been waiting and anticipating the return of the Devil's Bible for so long.
Was the exhibition popular?
Immensely. It attracted thousands upon thousands of people. So many, in fact, that visitors were only allowed a maximum of 10 minutes viewing time each.
Just 10 minutes. Why do you think we're still so interested in this book after all this time?
That's a great question. I think maybe somewhere deep down in the human condition, there's always going to be this sense that, well, that there are just some things which are too terrible, too immense, too strange to contemplate having emerged solely from a human soul, from a human mind.
We need a supernatural explanation.
Sometimes, perhaps. It's a fundamental way of personifying our deepest, darkest fears, giving them a tangible form, like that image on page 290. It makes the unexplainable slightly more graspable, even if terrifying.
So, what is the truth behind the stories then? This demonic curse, after over 800 years since it was written in such mysterious circumstances? What's the expert take?
Well, the human mind, you see, it's incredibly fertile. It loves imagining stories, especially around unusual things.
And this book is definitely unusual.
Genuinely very unusual.
Mhm.
So it should come as absolutely no surprise that there's a whole raft of stories and legends that surround it. That might even be why it was created in the first place, in part.
You mean the illustrator wanted this reaction?
One can well imagine the illustrator sitting there in the scriptorium, looking at that huge blank page, thinking, you know what? A full-size devil.
Hmm.
That will really get people talking.
And it certainly has, for 800 years.
It really has. Now, the idea that the Devil's Bible is cursed, it often connects to certain unfortunate events that have taken place around it throughout history.
The monastery fires, Rudolph's downfall, the injured librarian.
Exactly. It's easy to draw lines. However, from another perspective, the true miracle is simply that this book survives at all.
How so?
Most manuscripts from the medieval period, they've been lost. Reused vellum was incredibly valuable, often scraped clean and written over, turned into scrap, book bindings.
Right.
The fact that this colossal, unique book has survived wars, fires, regime changes, centuries of handling, it's extraordinary. You could argue it means it's been extremely blessed, because we still have it after 800 years.
A miracle of survival, not curse.
Precisely. And today, we keep the Devil's Bible in a secure, climate-controlled case, not because it's cursed.
But because it's precious.
Exactly. Because we have to monitor its environment, protect the vellum and inks, and keep it safe for future generations to study and appreciate this priceless artifact. Standard museum practice for something this old and valuable.
Okay, so let's circle back then to its possible original purpose. You drew that comparison with the Sedlick ossuary earlier.
Yes.
Could the purpose of the Devil's Bible, especially that stark devil image, be similar? A memento mori, a warning to 13th century Bohemia to remember death and live a good life.
I think that's a very strong possibility. Remember, Bohemia back then would have had traditions, folklores, legends going back into pre-Christian times, deeply connected with the natural world, the forests.
The pagan roots.
Exactly. So with things like the ossuary, the legends of Huska's gates to hell, and the Devil's Bible itself, we might actually be seeing a form of early Christianity that is deliberately adapting these earlier, older pagan ideas.
How?
Formulating them in their own specific Christian way, using familiar motifs, perhaps, to make the new religion resonate more deeply with the existing cultural frameworks, making it stick.
That makes sense. And life was harsh then.
Unimaginably harsh for many. If you lived in a society that was constantly racked by war, armies charging through your land, plagues decimating populations, your children all dying early, you would likely have a much more apocalyptic view of life.
The world felt more dangerous, more precarious.
Absolutely. And in that medieval mindset, the world split very easily, very starkly, between good and bad, heaven and hell, salvation and damnation. There wasn't much middle ground.
So choices felt ultimate.
Very much so. You could even imagine that some poor people in the Middle Ages leading such desperate and appalling lives might have actually tried to worship both God and the devil.
Hedging their bets.
Kind of. Hedging their bets in the desperate hope that one or the other would help them out, ease their suffering. Of course, this was condemned by the church as utter blasphemy, punishable by death.
Right.
But it didn't necessarily stop desperate people from doing it in secret, driven by fear and hopelessness.
Wow. Finally, when people point to that picture of the devil and say it curses the book, you mentioned they often miss something crucial.
Yes, a very deliberate artistic and theological choice made by the creators. On the very opposite page to the devil.
Facing it directly.
Directly facing it. On the verso page, there is a depiction of the city of God, of heaven.
Ah, so it's a direct contrast.
Exactly. It's heaven on the left page and the devil, representing hell, on the right page. This is the core duality presented right there, visually, at the heart of medieval Christianity. Its salvation and its opposite perdition presented starkly for the reader. No room for ambiguity.
The choice is clear.
The message is unavoidable.
Yeah.
What's it going to be? You can either lead the good life and go to heaven, or look what waits for you in hell. Choose your path.
So, is that all this book is then? A grandiose, incredibly impressive, awe-inspiring attempt to scare medieval Christians into doing the right thing.
I think the Devil's Bible is, well, it's extraordinary. I don't personally subscribe to the idea of a literal legend involving the devil dictating the text, as I believe there's a very obvious theological reason why that image occurs where it does, facing heaven.
Okay.
But I do think there is something extraordinary, almost miraculous, about the fact this thing got made at all. The sheer human effort involved.
The dedication.
It would have taken so much scholarship, so much dedication, so much patience to create it.
Yeah.
It is unequivocally an extraordinary human achievement, regardless of the legends that swirl around it.
What an incredible journey we've taken, from a desperate monk's alleged plea to becoming a royal treasure, a survivor of fire, and now this returning marvel viewed by thousands.
We're quite a biography for a book.
The story of the Devil's Bible truly reinforces that blend we talked about at the start: history, legend, human psychology, all wrapped up in one powerful physical artifact.
It has it all.
So, what does this all mean for us today, looking back? It means perhaps that some mysteries are simply too compelling, too resonant with our own hopes and fears to ever fully unravel. They offer this unique window into the enduring power of narrative, of belief.
Indeed. The debate over the origins of the Devil's Bible, written 8 centuries ago in Bohemia, it will almost certainly continue to fascinate us for many more centuries to come.
Why do you think it has such lasting power?
Perhaps it's because it so perfectly embodies that eternal human struggle, the struggle with temptation, with fear, with mortality, and with the enduring power of belief itself, whether that belief is placed in the divine or, as the legend suggests, the diabolical. And this raises, I think, an important final question for you, the listener, to ponder. How do you choose to interpret the enduring power of this extraordinary book?
Is it cursed?
Is it truly cursed, carrying misfortune in its wake? Or is its remarkable survival against all odds and its continuous fascination? Is that actually a testament to its unique blend of human artistry, deep-seated belief, and the powerful stories we continue to tell ourselves about the forces that shape our world?